It's going to have to go to 7 billion people.
Saving lives now, in the world, and building back better.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is.
That's how we're going to end this.
Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a long-planned agenda of a group of ultra-rich people and their financial mafia based in the city of London and on Wall Street to use a pseudo-pandemic as the guise behind which, while our attention is on the they want to complete their decades-long efforts to gain full and complete control over all of us. There are numerous platforms on which this group has been meeting and discussing this agenda, but the most important one is that of the World Economic Forum, which was invented in 1971 by a then 33-year-old Klaus Schwab. Its members are 1,000 global corporations with at least $5 billion in annual sales, politicians, media representatives, scientists, and other so-called high-profile personality. They meet once a year in Davos, but there are other such meetings, for example.
Now, they're just giving you all kinds of information and data that's really vital to understanding what the game plan really is. And the game plan is ultimate control. I believe they think they're almost at the point of no return where it can't be corrected. We can't fix this anyway. They're already winning. So why not just let the cat out of the bag a little further? That's some of the stuff we're seeing right now. But I want to show you another clip here from a wicked individual named Noah Harari. He's the false prophet. They call him the prophet, but he's giving the ultimate insider look at AI.
Contrary to what some conspiracy theories assume, you don't really need to implant chips in people's brains in order to control them or to manipulate them. For thousands of years, prophets and poets and politicians have used language and storytelling in order to manipulate and to control people and to reshape society. Now AI is likely to be able to do it. And once it can do that, it doesn't need to send a robot to shoot us. It can get humans to pull the trigger if it really needs to. AI has just hacked the operating system of human civilization. What we are potentially talking about is nothing less than the end of human history. Now, not the end of history, just the end of the human-dominated part of what we call history.
Now, you do know that what they're talking about is that even with the Mark of the Beast precursor practice serum, which don't take it this next go around because they will induce it, they will bring it out. They got something cooked up that they're going to bring to the forefront as strong and as quickly as they can, and it's already in motion. But here's the thing. What he is saying is no matter what happens next, however this goes, they want to simply have us manipulated by the digital overlords that they're trying to cause world domination with. Now, this man here is a false prophet. He's anti-religion, anti-God, anti-everything that has to do with anything of good moral fabric. He's completely demonized. He's got all these circumstances going on that would stand against everything that we would consider righteous and good, and yet here he is just talking about so much of this. Now, the big question that's been going on, we've been seeing now, you see the script, you see the idea that Pervy Gates and some of these sickos and twisted lizards are trying to bring onto the scene and the horizon. You see guys like this, that is the right-hand dark henchman of Klaus Schwab and all these wicked slime balls over there, and you recognize that altogether they want to dominate the culture and society. And so far, they're being pretty successful at it. One of the things that we've got to recognize is this, though, is people are arguing and saying, well, we've got things that have happened in everywhere from California a few years ago to the fires we're seeing in Canada to now we're looking at what they did in Hawaii, the way that broke down. You know, they won't even let true journalism in there at the moment because of the way things have gone. And let me just say something to you. They're saying, oh, it's all conspiracy based. Well, listen, whether there was a laser or not a laser, whether there was sky wars and all this stuff or not, here's what you got to recognize. Regardless of what it was, Something happened that has put more power into the hands of BlackRock, Vanguard, all these places, and the celebrities and the elites are the only ones benefiting off the poor civilians that are being crushed and dominated by these big corporate mongrels. They're allowing these things to happen because it's better for the elites that the small people are driven out, and whether or not it was by the powers of satellite lasers or airplanes, I want to say one thing about it though. Even in that conspiracy discussion, you got to recognize it's still a possibility. They have the technology. People say that is wild. Why would you say things like this? They have the technology. I want to show that to you. Let me show you a clip from nearly 10 years ago. 10 years ago, and it's Mikio Keku, and he's talking to an interview on a news program nearly 9 years ago, but this is actually at this point nearly 10 years ago. And here he is talking about weather control, agriculturally, and even militarization of weather control using special tech. Let's look at this together.
Lasers? Really? To change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain
Lasers.
once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me.
Bring down lightning bolts. Did you hear that part? We're actually sending lasers into the sky to precipitate weather and bring down lightning bolts. That's strong. Does that remind you of something that could be happening or maybe did happen? Let's keep watching.
Had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War.
In the
to watch out
60s.
the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and...
Agricultural, commercial, big events and sensitive buildings, military. Look at this. Here's 3 areas of the purpose of floods. Commercial, big events and sensitive buildings. What does that even mean? Big events and sensitive buildings. And military. Well then, what in the world would the military be doing with special weaponry that can begin to change the entire landscape, whether it be tsunamis, hurricanes, God forbid, earthquakes? But he's talking here about altering the weather so it begins to send down lightning bolts. He said they can do that. That's something they're already in motion with. Look at these 3 areas, all the way up to military. Very interesting. Let's keep going.
Want lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam. Firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
There it is. There it is, guys. Now listen, I think it's time that we are awake, not woke. I think it's time that we recognize what's actually going on in the world. The Spirit of the Lord wants victory. The Spirit of the Lord wants you to live, move, and have your being. And all these things that I'm showing you and we're talking about are not meant to scare you. They're meant to prepare you so you can be filled with the Word of God and you can keep going to the Bible. You got to keep going to the Word of God. You got to keep going to the Bible, because I'm telling you right now, we're living out Matthew 24. We're living it out, and there's so much to be said about this in the days and seasons and times we're living in. But I got to also say to you, I sense in here there's a resurgence. The ability to turn this narrative is yet upon us. I sense it so clearly. Now, there's so much going on, and it's very serious, but let me share another thing with you. Now, I'm going to talk to you just right now about the puppy killer. He's going to come on here. He's going to talk about, torturing puppies and all this stuff. That's not what he's going to talk about. He's actually going to talk about this. And the next round, how they want this done. They want people to cover up and do all this. Now, some of this has been tapped out of this particular video because some of the platforms it's on, if it's talked about too clearly, they will remove and take away. But let me show you this. This is really important. So we've removed some of this because it's important to hear this. Now, every time you hear a pause or a blanked out spot, it's talking about, oh yeah, this. Just so you know. Let's watch.
Brett Stevens in the Times talked about Cochrane. Put that on the screen. The most rigorous and comprehensive analysis of scientific studies conducted on the efficacy of for reducing the spread of respiratory illness, including COVID-19, was published last month. Its conclusions, said Tom Jefferson, the Oxford epidemiologist who is the lead author, were unambiguous. There is just no evidence that they make any difference, he told the journalist Mayan Damasi, full stop. But wait, hold on. What about the 5 as opposed to the lower quality surgical or cloth? Makes no difference. None of it, he said. Well, what about the studies that initially persuaded policymakers to impose masks? They were convinced by non-randomized studies, flawed observational studies. How do we get beyond that finding of that particular?
Let me say something about this. Now, he's going to come back, you know, this guy who has no benefit whatsoever by another, you know, incarceration of our liberties. He has no benefit other than the billions of dollars I'm sure he's raking in off of all of this and the lizard overlords that are holding his leash. But here's what I want to say about it. Now he comes back and says, well, you know, you got to look at these special reviews we do, these special studies. And he starts talking about something to really offset the fact that there's a lot of people. And in the beginning, he was even one of the ones that said, don't ever put this thing on. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't hold water. It doesn't really, meaning it doesn't really work, is what he initially kind of came out and said, it doesn't really work. Now he's saying, you got to look at some of these special things that we're talking about here. Now let's take a look at what he says. His response to all the scientific data is very different because it benefits him and his lizard goblin cronies. Let's check this out.
Review.
Yeah, but there are other studies, Michael, that show at an individual level for individual. When you're talking about the effect on the epidemic or the pandemic as a whole, the data are less strong.
The data are less strong. Now, here's something we got to recognize. Is God is calling you to rise above this. Now you're saying, why are you even showing us this stuff? Why are we going through it? Because there is a great deception afoot, and you've got to understand it. The deception is huge. What we're seeing right now is absolutely terrible. Now, I'm going to show you one more clip, and then I want to go into a few other things here. Let me share this with you. There has been I'm trying not to just say the words outright, okay? But there's been a great cover-up of people that are no longer on the planet because of a certain something that was in their system over the last couple years. And it depends on to what level and to how you've experienced it. Now, here's a clip of a bodybuilder, and he begins to go into how he has been treated for the Mark of the Beast precursor practice serum 4 times, 4 treatments. And then he talks about even some of the stuff that when you look into his system and they did tests and they found things in it. And sadly, he did this and he's talking about it out of peer pressure that he got it done and whatnot. But this is just one example of tens of thousands of individuals that have actually no longer been able to keep their standing on the planet because of the tragedy of what's gone on. So let's take a look at this very quickly, and let's see if this if this will remain on the air with us. Let's check this out.
Did you get the? I got the.
Did you really?
Yeah. Even 4.
Really?
Yeah.
Peer pressure you to the.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I went to the doctor and I did my blood work again because I take my blood work all the time, and then I show it to the doctor and we kind of see these particles and I'm like, what is this? And then they
No way, dude.
This is from this, and I'm like, oh my god. He said, why people have these white blood clots, tons of them in the blood everywhere, and so they're like, this is what you maybe have.
How sad. And he's no longer with us. That is just tragic. He was Elijah and I were talking before the program today, and he was going to start a family. He was stepping out of bodybuilding, all that. Here's the bottom line. is that this is likely what ended his existence. And you see this happening over and over again. And if you just do a little bit of homework on it, you're watching all this stuff take place, and yet nobody wants to bring it out into the mainstream. And there's so much of this that's happening. And if anybody tries to bring it out too clearly, they'll try to shut you down for it. So this is something that we've got to really consider. And I'm just going to say this to you. Please do not get this. Don't do it. I'm asking you, please don't do it. And if you have done it, there's regimen of like, you can take all kinds of vitamins and stuff that can kind of get you through it, apparently. And I don't know much about a lot of it, but I do know that a lot of people have been able to kind of come through it if they've only had one or maybe at the most two. But if you keep going with it, their end result is they want to see you completely done. And they're also trying to put it in, I'll try to do this throughout the next few days here, but I'll show you the fact that they're trying to make it so you can get the same results as this guy simply by respiratory issues that they're trying to release right now to get it in all of our meats, into our breathable spaces, and they're going to begin to try to push it out that way, try to get everybody the same results anyway. Because you got to remember, this is not a typical cure that they're trying to bring out. It is a horrible, horrible thing. One of the things that we shared some time ago on this broadcast, many times right on the whiteboard or just through prophetic unction, is we talked about a few years back about lockdowns, even climate lockdowns that could be coming. If we could, let's take a look right now about a prophetic word that we gave back in July of 2021 about lockdowns coming regarding climate. Let's take a look at this.
If the whole pandemic narrative is not what some of the evil powers that be are looking for it to become, they will begin to cause, and I'm going to say this again, I've been saying this for months, but there's going to be climate change. Now this sounds wild, but listen to me. Downs.
2 years ago.
Remember I said this. I believe this is coming at some point in the not too distant future. And people would say, that sounds insane. Well, quite frankly, I think a lot of the things that are said sound insane right until they happen.
Right until they happen.
See some of this begin to unfold. And you say, climate change. Yep. I think that they'll begin to say, oh, the urgency of the greenhouse gases and all the things that are happening are so severe that we need to do this for the good of humanity. That could be one thing that begins to unfold here. Another thing that I think could begin to happen, induced or real, or how it begins to happen, and I've said this before, people didn't enjoy this, but I'm still going to say it, but I think that we are still in store for what they will cause or begin to talk about with food shortages.
Okay, we'll stop there. Let's go to the next climate lockdown. I want to look at this real quick because I think this is coming.
I've said this for the last few years, but about climate lockdowns.
And it sounds crazy to talk this way. It really does. It sounds like, why would you bring this out? Why would you discuss this? Well, this is something that you see, you hear, you have an unction on. Now, this is from earlier this year in 2023, but when you're looking at it, it's a thing. But let me just finish the thought on this, on the clip, then I want to go into something else.
Scenario, but there's going to be a climate, I'll say it this way. Suddenly they're going to say the urgency, okay? They're going to begin to put, and it will impact airlines, by the way. There's going to be a climate impact involving airlines, the prices of airlines, all this stuff is coming. Mark the word of the Lord. Mm-hmm. They're going to try to push a climate on airlines, travel, the way to do things. This will become something, if they have it their way, and we got to pray against this, but I sense this in my spirit, that they're going to begin to push this, and the climate scenario will impact airlines and travel, many different arenas, even what you purchase, that it'll only be for the elite eventually. We've been prophesying this. The Spirit of the Lord prophesied it to us for the last 2-3 years now, but I see climate lockdowns. If they can't push another agenda where they make you get the, stick ya and all that stuff, they want to begin to push a climate.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Now, I'm going to show you another clip because a woman came out and began to speak out about these issues and actually has brazenly gone against these lizard overlords, these wicked pervert mafia types from over in Davos and then the other places around the world. But let me show you this here. This is Christine Anderson, and she talks about the 15-minute cities. She's talking about the real agenda, and she mentions the word climate lockdown. So it's something that people have said, oh, that can't be, that would never happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord does share things before they happen. We just need to pay attention to it. And then also, the reason we show these things or talk about it is not to scare you. In the words of Rick, it's to prepare you. And we want to not just prepare through knowledge, we also want to prepare through prayer. So when you know these things and you begin to pray, we can bring change, real intercession, real altering of the narrative through prayer and intercession. But let me first of all show you this 15-minute city conversation with Christine Anderson. Watch this.
15-minute cities, they will have to have those before down. So in Great Britain, some county already passed legislation. They will be able to impose a climate down. That's the next step. So in order to do that, they will have to have these 15-minute cities. The next step then, of course, will be you are only allowed to leave your immediate area for, let's say, 2 or 3 times a year. So, but there's other people that may have more money and they can actually buy your passings off of you. So guess what? The poor people will be left in these 15-minute neighborhoods, while the ones that are better off get to go wherever they want to go. Look at Saudi Arabia, for instance. They're pulling up Neom City. They call it the line.
The line, we've talked about that.
This is like a structure in the middle of the desert, 200 kilometers long, 200 meters wide, 500 meters high, and it will house up to 9 million people. If I wanted to get total control of the people, that's exactly where and how I would house them. And then having them on a 3 meals a day prescription.
Bugs.
Well, guess what will happen if you do not do as you are told? They will probably cancel that. It's so easy. It will be a complete impoverishment and enslavement of all the people.
Now, it's interesting how these days, in this moment, they're allowing this stuff even out. You know, a year ago, 2 years ago, a lot of these kind of conversations weren't even allowed out, just so you understand this. And if you're watching the media right now, you're watching the trend right now, you can see a lot of this is actually coming out more, and you're beginning to see it on all the platforms again. You're seeing it really out. So while we can, we're going to talk about it as much as we can, at the levels we can. It's an interesting thing, and I'm going to make one comment on this. I gave a word a while back, and this is something that's going on. Now, there's multiple things taking place, and I'm trying to throw out a net and capture so much of these nuances and really pick up on what the Spirit of the Lord is saying through all of it. Like we talked about, watch the small news, look at trends, look at signs of the times, look at circumstances that are happening. One of those is just in the last few days, there was a festival that's a pagan festival. It's totally ungodly, called Burning Man. Burning Man just took place, and out at Burning Man, they suddenly had something take place regarding the weather, and basically a monsoon came in, washed it all out, and everybody was struggling, and it was very difficult, to the point that even I think the actor Chris Rock, the comedian, he had to hitchhike his way out of there, and people were trapped. It wasn't good. There's conspiracies about illnesses that were breaking out. There was, water happening. Where it starts and stops, there hasn't been a lot of super clear news at the moment. But I will say this, I gave a word, and I believe sometimes you prophesy things, you know in part, you prophesy in part. I've been prophesying before I really understood the fullness of it about BlackRock, about this financial thing called BlackRock. I'd shared this word, but interestingly enough, there's a nuance in this prophetic word that maybe we'll circle up on and give you more clarity on. But I gave this prophetic word some time ago, maybe the beginning of the year. And I've had some of you writing us and saying, Joseph, you prophesied about a red stone that would hit a BlackRock, or that God would deal with the BlackRock and Babylonian system. Interestingly enough, and I'll show you this for the purpose of my commentary here. Interestingly enough, when we gave this word about the BlackRock, God dealing with the BlackRock, it's an interesting, sometimes prophetic thing. There's a word called sensus plenior, meaning more than one thing can happen at a time. There's a deeper, fuller meaning. So I prophesied this word, the Lord shared it with us, and I went on the broadcast and said it. Interesting. Here's the point. The desert that Burning Man is in is called the Black Rock Desert. Let me say that again. It's called the Black Rock Desert. Now, then suddenly there was this wild weather stuff, shut it down, all of that. What I want to say about it is, number one, we need to pray for the people. Number two, I don't believe that this is the ultimate fulfillment of this word, but there's sometimes nuances and signs and wonders with it. So let me just show you just a very little bit of this clip that shows me prophesying about BlackRock and God dealing with the Babylonian system. And then yet here we see this desert called BlackRock, and there's a Babylonian type of paganism that's going on being dealt with. So I'll show you this clip and I'll give you my thoughts again.
I heard the Lord saying, I heard the words shout grace, grace to it. And the Lord's going to deal with that rock. There was a rock that followed them through the wilderness.
The desert.
But there's a black rock today. And this Antichrist Babylonian system that wants to stand up, control you, control your children. I hear the Lord saying, I will pierce the black rock.
Okay. So here's the point. The point is we brought that out. It's very interesting. Piercing the black rock, all of this. It's interesting we talk about the wilderness in this word and the rock, which is Jesus. You read that in Corinthians, that there was a rock that followed them through the desert. I said wilderness here, and that it was a black rock. I find it interesting, the symbolism, and sometimes these things overlap. You might call that happenstance, that it was, just no big deal. But I had a lot of people reach out and say, Joseph, you said this. Now, they will try an aggressive repeat. A repeat, they will say. A repeat will come. They will try an aggressive repeat with many new avenues and many serious events. The aggressive repeat is coming. They're bringing a repeat, I hear the Spirit saying. This repeat is coming, but I say unto you, a red stone will rise and collide with the black stone. A red stone will arise and collide with the black stone. The red stone shall collide with the black stone, as many are shouting a repeat. It is what has happened in 20 all over again with more pressure and more doom and more demands. And the black stone will rise, but the red stone will rise to meet it. Sometimes you know in part, you prophesy in part. And I believe there is something about God dealing with this Babylonian system. And you see it in signs, wonders, interesting things that happen. And so here we're seeing it. And I believe that what happened is symbolic with Burning Man. Do I think that God's trying to hurt those people? No, I don't. Do I think that terrible things are happening because the Lord's just pouring out his wrath against these pagans like he did in the Old Testament? Well, it just depends on the circumstances behind the veil. I don't know all of it, but I will tell you this. What I do know is there is a sign in this that there is a judgment being pronounced against that type of terminology. Amazingly enough, it's called BlackRock, and here we see the same type of paganism that happened even in the Old Testament, and suddenly there was an outpouring of God's judgment against it. Now, I don't know where that starts and stops. I'm not trying to make a big doctrinal statement out of this, but I will say there's nothing in this prophetic word, and I believe it is a sign and a symbol of God dealing with the institution of BlackRock also. It's only because I've seen this prophetically, so I'm sharing in real time prophecy in the news, and we're looking at that. It's also another interesting word. I'm going to share another thing with you right now because I have a few things I want to comment on. Recently, I gave a prophetic word that was kind of unique, and a lot of people thought, why would you share that word? But I heard it in my spirit, and then we had many people messaging the ministry and talking to us about, hey, you gave this word, but Joseph, this is what we think it really is. So let me show you the unique word that I wrote on the board, and I couldn't believe I said it, but I did because I saw it, and I believe this is a preview of something that is to come, and I believe it's going to be a greater watchword as we go forward. So let me share this word with you.
I've seen this for a week. I'll submit it to you. Please discern and pray. here's the watchword I'm seeing, and I don't know how soon this is or if it's right around the corner, but I believe just like UFOs, the climate narrative, all the stuff they're talking about, there's going to be a heightened word or a sensitivity to this word.
Who writes that?
Yep, I said it. Zombies. I could just hear some of my ministry friends right now. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. That's what I want to say.
But I see things, and even if it doesn't make sense to me or logic, there's this word I see.
I do.
And I don't know where this starts or stops. I don't know if this is going to become more of a trend. I don't know if they're going to begin to do a pseudo like statement about it, where they begin to say, yep, it's beginning to happen. There's things happening. You're going to hear rumors of outbreaks.
I do think that's going to happen.
There's something about this that I sense coming. And again, this will have to do with this. I don't know, man. I'll just put it here. You know, when you begin to see that they're finding labs in the great state where Newsom is, and boy, he's done just a bang-up job there, hasn't he? And, you know, you're looking at how these guys are doing things. I believe that anything is on the table right now.
Okay,
and when I say that,
I'll stop that for now. Here's what I want to say about it. You know, we know in part, we prophesy in part. I'm not trying to say I have it all figured out. I'm the highest, level prophetic voice you've ever heard in your life. I just know this. I see things, and if it stays with me, I choose to share it. And I let you discern it, and I walk through it with a sense of reverence for the Lord. I walk through it with the Word of God, and if I see these things, there's a reason I share them. So this word zombies was with me for a good week before I wrote it on the board, because I didn't want to talk about it. It's so wild to use that type of terminology. But over the last few years, there's been many of these type of things God's had me say. I believe the Lord has given me an unction to say I do, and then it begins to unfold months or years after the fact. So we've had many of you reach out to us and say, my goodness, you gave this word, but here, Joseph, do you not know about this? And it's amazing sometimes the things I don't know about, and many of you make me attuned to, and you give me the information for. So I'll just show you one thing. There's a clip somebody sent us, and it has to do with this new zombie drug that creates people that appear this way. And then I'll comment after this. Let's take a look at this.
Zombie drug is sweeping through America right now. Eerie footage coming out of Philadelphia shows crowds of people slouched over but still standing. The insane part is that this is a common scene in almost every major city in America.
Terrible.
They look like they are conscious, but not at the same time. The drug they are on is called xylazine, or more commonly known as trank.
Wow.
It is known to place people into a zombie-like state where they are unable to move and seem to lose all awareness. People using the drug are put into a complete trance and can be seen walking around like an animal.
Jesus,
the drug
help 'em.
causes infections of the limbs, which most commonly result in amputations. It has been described as being so addictive that even a single accidental hit of it could get you hooked.
Wow.
Trank is now in about 90% of Philadelphia's drug supply,
Wow.
and can be commonly found in low-income areas of almost all U.S. cities. You can walk downtown right now and most likely see people like this.
Wow.
Looks like it's time to get out of America for a little bit.
Well, anyway, I don't agree with that statement. But let me say this to you, is that when you're looking at this kind of thing, I not only believe this is because of this drug-induced state that they're showing us here. I have to tell you, I sense something else coming with this that could be on the heels of this type of narrative. But here it is. This is one fulfillment to that's already been taking place, apparently. In addition to this, though, I do believe that it's going to be one of the watchwords over the next few years here. That's actually going to be real world. It's going to come out and people be talking about it. Now, where does that start and stop? I'll let you discern it. But the reason I'm saying this is I believe with all the tyranny they're pushing with some of the experimental things, the mark of the beast precursor practice serum, that they're causing so many people to take by force. I'm telling you, there's something coming with this narrative. The future is not what people think it is. And yet we can change it. We can have a bright future still. There's a lot of hope in the Word of God as we continue to press forward. But I got to tell you, there's so much going on that we got to begin to turn and recognize. Now, another thing, the Mandela effect. Have you heard about this, the Mandela effect? I have a couple thoughts about it. And I'm going to get into it. I'm going to show you a clip explaining what it is. And uniquely enough, it has ties, as people suggest, to CERN. I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards. I'm going to show you a clip here in a moment where they basically have a young kid who came up with an ideology or a scientific process that began to unbuckle and show some of this stuff to the people or the culture. And he's a young kid. It's interesting, the clip that they're using and saying this is where it came from. I have my own suspicions about all this mess, but I want to talk about it because there's nothing with this, and I'm going to explain it in a minute. And it's either one issue or two, it's another. And one does have potential ties to CERN. And if you've seen me talk about CERN, you know where I'm going with some of it, but also it could just be a mechanism of psychological battle that's out there. But let me show you what they're talking about with the Mandela effect, and then I want to get into it because we need to have clarity through the Word of God, and we need to have clarity prophetically and not be whisked away and washed away by every crazy wind of doctrine or social norms and values they try to push on us, mechanisms. But let's look at this just so you understand it.
Perhaps the most exotic theory about the threats of the Large Hadron Collider
which
is
is
the one
CERN.
in which a global catastrophe has already occurred, and we barely survived it. This guy's name is Max Laughlin, and he looks no older than 15. Anyway, his fans call him one of the smartest teenagers on the planet. The founder of a high-tech startup, Laughlin also demonstrates deep knowledge of physics. And according to his hypothesis, the Large Hadron Collider experiments have already
Doogie Howser
a cataclysm that affected all of us. Whether it was a vacuum decay or a plasma explosion doesn't make too much of a difference. What matters here is that the survivors of this disaster were transported to a neighboring parallel universe without even noticing it, but only for a time. It's the Large Hadron Collider that Max Laughlin blames for the so-called Mandela effect. When the rights activist and former South African President Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5th, 2013, it turned out that thousands of people across the globe thought he was long dead. They were convinced he died in prison in the 80s and never got to be president. It might have been explained by mass hallucination, but today, the Mandela effect has spread to a whole bunch of things, influencing people around the world. Some claim that the mascot of the Monopoly game has always donned a monocle, even though he never has.
Luke, I am your father was the next thing they're going to. But here's my point in bringing all this out. Mandela effect is where you take pop culture, things that you were familiar with when you were younger, and suddenly it's altered a little bit. And one of the big ones they talk about is the Bernstein Bears, right? Bernstein or Bernstein Bears. They misspell it. There's things they talk about with all these different signs and popular culture things that are just altered from what we understood as kids. Now, let me talk about this, and the reason I want to talk about it is because I want to get into dimensionalism just for a quick minute here. And you're saying, what in the world? But let me show you something about this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 dimensions that are known to us. We as human beings live in a 3-dimensional space, okay? Just real quick. We live in a 3-dimensional space. This is our perception of reality. Now, we might not be able to perceive all of these arenas, but we can perceive maybe going backwards, which this would be like us looking at a photograph, and this would be, much less than that. Looking at a 4-dimensional space, we can understand it because that would be the I guess the equivalent of looking at your hand and seeing the front and the back of your hand and the front at the same time. You can imagine that. You can kind of imagine that. But what you can't imagine is what begins to happen when you get into the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10 dimensions. I believe this is heightened realms of the spirit. Supernatural. The supernatural realms, I believe, exist here. Now, the Large Hadron Collider is a giant circumference. It's a circle several miles around. And what they do is they're firing these elements, or I could say microscopic protons, neutrons, atoms at nearly the speed of light at one another in this circle, and they fire them nearly at the speed of light. When they collide, they explode. These little microscopic explosions. When they do this and they explode, what happens then is then you get scientific observance. They observe it. This is an eye. They're looking at this, and they come up with, you know, hypothesis as to what that is, right? So when they do this, there's all kinds of things they were trying to discover by looking and observing these explosions of these microscopic, nearly speed of light collisions, and they are mapping out and trying to discover the very fabric of our universe. Okay? That's what they say on the outside. Then there's the whole cultic side of this that you recognize they're bringing out, and they're trying to really, you know, bring to the mainstream. When you see the multi-armed god Shiva outside of CERN, and this is of course CERN I'm talking about. They have another facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. They have other facilities around that are like sister facilities, very similar to it. But CERN does all these things. And so the very fabric of the universe, this is where they were finding the God particle, the Higgs boson, right? They're finding all these things. Now, why am I even bringing this out? Well, one of the theories is that guys like Hawking, Stephen Hawking, all of them said, if you do this, you could be opening up black holes. You could create black holes that would destroy the entire Earth. Some people have conjectured that you could indeed begin to open up different parallel universes, because there's proven there are 10 dimensions. 5 of them are knowable to humanity, maybe 4, and 5 through 10 of them are not known. But what can happen is because these dimensions coincide, and they've proven this through quantum physics and whatnot, they're saying when they're doing this, they could potentially be popping open other dimensional things that they bleed over into other areas. They're saying some of these other dimensions might be, and this is very crude how I'm saying this, but they could be bleeding over into our dimension. We could be having interaction with other dimensional spaces that are beginning to just kind of flood into our space that we typically wouldn't have. That's why we're having weird and unique encounters. So when you're looking at this, this is where you start to get into the topic of the whole thing they're calling the Mandela effect. Now, I have a couple other thoughts about this. Okay, the Mandela effect. And of course, we honor Nelson Mandela and what he did and all this, but they're saying it started when people thought his life came to an end at a certain time, but then they thought it had already happened previously, and everybody remembered it on a mass scale. What they're saying is because of the change of things and what even happened back in 2020, that it was all the result of the activating of CERN. And CERN, opening up different dimensions, could be bleeding alternative realities into our space, or we stepped into one and came out. Here's what I really think is going on. This is one actual possibility, that they've messed with time and space so much over there, trying to let fallen angels and demonic activity into the natural, because there's quotes, guys are on record, some of the scientists over there, I have the quotes, saying, we're opening things up. We're opening up, I'll just say it this way, we're opening up portals, right? And this is what portals look like sometimes with these swirly things. This is actually what they've clocked them as looking like, these portals. And they're saying we open up portals, and there's things that we can send through data, and they answer back. They don't know, and the scientists are saying they don't know what might go through to the other side, which is all these dimensions up here, okay? Because we're talking about these dimensions, of course. This is what I'm referring to, that when they're in this space, these portals actually go to these other dimensions, is the argument. That when they open up this portal, they don't know what will go through and what would remain there, or what could come from out of these dimensions into this space. So it's an interesting thought. The whole thing is very fascinating, but the point being that this could be real. There's something that can happen here scientifically. There's a lot that could be happening, and fallen angel tech and angelic beings that are a rebellion against God, they want to do this, and this could be what the book of Revelation talks about as the bottomless pit, right? We could be seeing some of that beginning to happen with smoke and crazy demonic entities coming out of the bottomless pit, or simply other dimensions, you know, out of hell, out of these kind of things. That's a conversation piece. So ultimately, though, what is this Mandela effect about? What are we really seeing here? Well, I believe it's actually humanity giving up their free moral agency to dark powers. And the Bible simply calls this strong delusion. Okay? That's what we're dealing with, strong delusion. So whether this is all part of it, the CERN narrative that I'm telling you about through, and people are saying, my goodness, it's different. Now, if you're a discerning person, you know something's different. You know something's not the same as it once was. It is different in the air, in the culture, and all of it. Things that we used to put up with, we would never, things we're putting up with today, we would have never put up with 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. But here we are being marshaled into a different time in the culture. We got, people that don't know what they are. They don't know what they come from. They don't understand what's going on. You got to call people by certain names. And that's only really in the U.S. right now. And we got all kinds of mess happening. We got scientific mess. We got a altering of reality. We got an altering of what is right, what is wrong. We've got cats and dogs living together. We got all these things that are just happening on the horizon. And yet when we look at this mess, I believe this is what the Bible begins to talk about, strong delusion. Romans talks about because they removed God. They removed God from their thinking, from their mind. They were given over to strong delusion. And that's what we're seeing here, I believe, strong delusion. So the Mandela effect, I believe, is mainly the fact that society has been given over to strong delusion more and more. Let's look at this clip from a man in black.
My name is Joseph Spencer. From May 1970 to October 1997, I served the United States government as a top secret operative, but not in a category that is commonly known or understood. I was known as a man in black. In 1994, the World Population Summit in Cairo, Egypt, had 160 nations participate, where they all agreed that the human population was out of control and must be stopped.
Wow.
Because the world is running out of resources.
Hold up. That's what they say. They say the world is running out of resources. That's the narrative. That's the agenda, to incite fear. They always want to make it seem that mankind is the problem, mankind is the issue, but we know that God made this planet to sustain humanity. He called Adam to be fruitful and multiply. God made this world, so no matter how many people are in it, the world will sustain it, reproduce for it, and that's the way it operates. What this man's talking about is a precursor to the Antichrist agenda that wants to stop humanity and stop God's original intention, which ultimately we know Jesus will stop this and fix it. But let's continue.
It was formed that would mandate the reduction of humans from 6 billion to 800 million by the year 2030.
Did you hear that number?
Finding a method
800 million. From 6 billion to 800 million. Now there's a whole nother conversation we could get into about the Georgia Guidestones, which we've done programs on, where they, were decimated, whether that was symbolically or somebody did it. The point is there's some things in motion that these elites are allowing to happen, and they're bringing forward. But you recognize they want to bring the whole world population down to 800 million. That's a wild number. Let's keep listening to this man in black.
To wipe out nearly 95% of the population. Solutions were discovered, investigated, tested, then created, and have been in full force since. The procedures have been inflicted onto the human race are as follows. 1. Toxic levels of chemically enhanced fluoride have been secretly added to our drinking water over the last 20 years in every city and community on the planet.
20 years.
I personally oversaw the delivery of fluoride barrels to Denver, Chicago, Tampa, and Minneapolis water departments.
Now, when you're understanding this, it's because there is a way of dumbing down people. There's a lot with the chemical he just talked about that actually takes people's testosterone down. It takes people, especially men, it takes them to a weak status. And it's something to really consider because they don't want men to stand up. And right now, as a nation, we're very vulnerable because of the fact that there's so few real fighting men left that can rise up and stand against this type of tyranny and wickedness. Now, when we're looking at this stuff, there's a lot to consider, and it continues to go on. Now, that was a man in black. His name was Joseph Spencer. He had been working for these agencies since the early 70s, and he's just divulging things now. Let's look at another clip very quickly here from RFK, of all people, the deviant of the other side. And I'm not saying I agree with his policies, but there are some points he makes that are worth considering. And he really is, at least from his lens and perspective, a voice of reason, a voice of truth. He has a lot that I totally disagree on, and that is over the issue of the unborn and all that. But let's look at what RFK has to talk about as he is suggesting or declaring they're putting a pesticide into our water also. Let's check this out.
Probably the most disturbing endocrine disruptor, and this is something we should all be looking at, is atrazine.
What is atrazine?
It's in the water. It's a pesticide. But they took atrazine and they put it in a tank with 40 frogs.
How about that?
They put it below the exposure levels that EPA considers acceptable to humans. They were all male frogs, and 30 of those frogs were chemically castrated. 4 of them turned into females and produce fertile eggs.
Report toxic herbicide found in many Texans' drinking water. That's from 2018, November 20th.
And we're subjecting our children to exposure to that every day. What does this do to sexual development in children?
Indeed.
Nobody knows, but we know what it does to frogs.
So what they're saying is, and here you see Rogan and you see RFK talking about it. And of course, somebody that was really, really talked down to in the media and for a variety of reasons said, you know, they're turning the frogs to the other persuasion, you know. But here's what you got to recognize is this is a real scenario that they're doing. They're trying to emasculate, dumb down the culture. And people say this is conspiracy-based stuff. It's all that. Well, here's the thing. They have proof of this. There's studies, case studies. All this stuff is going on. Now, in the middle of it all, we've got to recognize something about it. The Spirit of the Lord is in no way leaving you behind. And I need you to know this right now. So have you seen these clips or where people are talking about basically that some of the public entities we see are actually masked actors? They're wearing masks and it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo episode or Mission Impossible where they're able to take them off and reveal somebody else. Now, the interesting part is this technology exists. Kind of strange.
You can't tell me this is normal. Look at his forehead.
I don't know. You know, people say it.
It ain't normal. Look at it.
Odd and
I can't
creepy.
believe anything you see these days. These glasses aren't even real. Neither is my face. All this stuff was 3D tracked on using these dots that I drew on with this marker. Actually, the marker isn't real either. Neither is the background. Or my face. Have a good night.
These guys are central casting. There's nobody in Hollywood that looks like these people.
So interesting. I want to show you another one here. Check this out. Now, when you look at this, you can see that they begin to stretch the skin on this mask. That's a mask. Now watch, it'll be proven. See how they stretch the skin? Kind of different. Hi, the name's Lou. I'm your local plumber. I'm Vincent. I like sandwiches and stuff. Wait, actually, my name is Martin. Okay, anyway, the point is when you're looking at some of these individuals and the masks, there's a lot to be considered. Here's my point. I'm showing this to you because when you consider what they're capable of or what they're willing to do to maintain power, the bottom line is some of this stuff might be real. Now, where does it start and stop? That's something we've got to consider. And the reason I bring it out to you is because there are moments you see things and you say, my goodness, that doesn't set right with me. Today is the day where, number one, you pay attention to the things that don't set right with you, and then you add your faith. Instead of your conspiracy or getting on that wheel of conspiracy, which there's a lot of things that have been proven true by conspiracy, we need to get on the wheel of faith and begin to apply our faith to what we're seeing and begin to get in the Holy Ghost and listen to Jesus, okay? Now, the other reason is that there's so much being said out there, you don't know what is up and what is down, but yet you do see these issues taking place. So what do we do about it? Well, again, we get into the Word of God. Now, let me say something to you very quickly. I want to show you something from the Word of God. I got another thing I want to show you, and I believe the Lord is just simply helping us by bringing us to the point of knowing what the Spirit is saying. You know, when my kids were younger, I would take them to movies. I would take them to movies, not bad movies, just, culturally relevant movies. Why? So I could have a voice and let them see society through my lens while I still had that opportunity. And I believe when we look at these things, some of it might be absolutely nonsense. It might be absolutely hilarious and not even worthwhile. The other point is some of this stuff that we would have considered nonsense 5-10 years ago suddenly is coming to the forefront that it might have some validity to it. And my point in talking this stuff through or showing you some of these things is so we can look at it and say, you know what, I'm not impressed. I've already seen it. Even if it is true, everything they conspire to say is true, so what? Jesus is Lord. I'm still here and I'm still bringing a light in darkness, and I will not be deceived. Well, I'd like to give you an update on the building project, where we're at, how it's going. As many of you know, we've acquired a brand new building. We're calling it the World Broadcast Center, and we acquired it for 1/4 of its total value. It's an amazing gift from God, and we're so thankful to you and many of you who are watching, standing with us, whether you're a partner or a viewer. We encourage you. I would like to simply ask you if you would help us move the ball down the field. Right now, I'm meeting with our team, Josh Coley, many of the leaders are helping us remodel. We're getting experts in to really build the blueprint of where we want to go. This building will include 2 major studios, meeting space, executive offices for our team, plenty of parking for the style and size of studio meetings we want to do. And I got to tell you, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It is a gift from God that we got this. I'm blown away at what the Lord has done. It is a wonderful thing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. If you're interested in helping us get this building paid in full by the end of the year, we sure would appreciate that. We're believing God for your victory, your breakthrough, and every person that sows in this, that you will have great increase in your life. Well, I am so thankful you're here. You know, this ministry is expanding. We are growing, and it is to the glory of the Lord. And I want to say something to every partner here, whether you are a recent partner or been with us a very long time. From the bottom of our heart, thank you. Partners, because of you, we could not do what we're doing. We're taking territory, we're building new media all the time, we're advancing, we're putting out written materials and giving away content all over the world. And we're so grateful to you for it. You send us on journeys that cost nothing to the people who are bringing us in. And I want to say simply to you, thank you. Now, if you want to join our partner family and you're watching, I encourage you to do so today. You go to josephz.com, or you can text the keyword GIVE to 719-259-0029. If you join our partner family, you're going to hear from us. We will love on you. We will pray for you. We will stand with you over all your dreams and your visions. And I'm telling you what, Heather and I, we constantly are praying for our partners. So please consider, if you're on the fence, join the partner family and let's do this thing together, both in prayer and generosity. We believe that God is going to make all your purpose, destiny, and dreams come to pass. We're standing with you for it. So thank you for considering partnering with us today. Again, you go to josephz.com. We have a lot of territory to take, and we want to do it together. God bless you. Remember, on a bad day, you're the best there is, and you are called to be and shine the light in darkness. I'll see you again next time right here as we continue bringing a now word of the Lord. God bless you.